Welcome and good evening. Tonight we're going to talk about the Safe Return to Dance, a guide for parents. So for many dancers, it is what they live and breathe, and so being able to get back into the studio is not giving them only physical benefits, but mental as well. So quick disclaimer. The information that's presented tonight is mostly for information and knowledge. When in doubt, always refer back to provincial and municipal guidelines and protocols. In some areas, simply crossing a highway or a street will change the guidelines. So know the specific guidelines for where you dance. So COVID-19 is transmitted through droplets that come from when we breathe, cough, or sneeze. So with physical activity, it increases the ability of transmission, especially in close contact. What they found is within 6 feet is where the highest range of transmission is. So that's why we have the 6 feet or 2 meter difference in our distancing. If inside, transmission is higher than outside. It's not only transmission based on being face-to-face. We do have to look at contaminated surface. So if someone coughs and then opens a door, if now the door handle has droplets on it. So that's why we talk about hand hygiene and being as clean as possible. It comes in through your eyes, nose, and mouth, so that's why we avoid touching our faces. And again, hand hygiene is important through that. Mask wearing is encouraged for anybody just in everyday situations, though it's currently not encouraged for intense physical activity, but it has been shown that you are able to wear one and oxygen levels do not go down when wearing a mask. So now we're getting back to training. If possible, you want to see if your studio is allowing for outside training when the weather permits, just as transmission levels are lower outside. We want to try and keep those participants 2 to 3 meters apart and modify their training as much as possible. So these are questions you get to ask your studio. As a parent, if you want to look at something that can be used, the Canadian Association for Sport and Exercise Medicine came out with a risk assessment and modification tool that you can go through. So even though you might not be making your studio decisions, it's something you can look at as to how, what risks are there. So it's very simple. 0 is none, 1 is a yes, and you get your score, and then it finds out where you are in a risk assessment. So as a parent, the biggest thing you need to do right now is ask questions. Ask questions of your studio, of the teachers, of your school as we're going back. Ask questions of experts in the field of medicine and sport medicine to see what their opinions are and on ways that we can reduce the risk. So in regard to the facility, you're going to want to ask questions as how do the dancers arrive? Are classes arriving at different times? So do we have 5 classes starting at 4, or do we have a class starting at 4, 4:10, 4:20, and so on, to make sure that we don't have a cluster of dancers arriving at once? Are we using the same entrance and exit? So if so, are exit times staggered from arrival times? And what to do if you're in a shared facility. So not everybody has the benefit of being in a private facility. Some are in city-owned facilities or are sharing a facility with other organizations. So you need to talk to the facility and find out, or see if your studio has talked to the facility about how that works. Are you to arrive at a specific door to minimize your exposure walking through the building? Are there only going to be certain times that you can come in? So these are important questions to ask if you're in a shared setting. Cleaning between classes is important. So how often are studios being cleaned and who is doing the cleaning? Are they expecting the dancers to do the cleaning? Are the teachers doing the cleaning? And what type of cleaning is being done? Are they just quickly mopping the floor with soap and water? Are they using a high-level disinfectant? Are we using fogging machines, which makes it actually quicker to be able to get through one room and make sure that all surfaces have been touched? And what about shared spaces? So entrances, bathrooms, hallways, lounges, are they open? What are students to do during breaks, if there are breaks scheduled? And what's the cleaning schedule for those as well? So what are our facility rules going to be? They should be encouraging cleaning your hands as much as possible, and hand sanitizer should be placed throughout the studio. Maybe have your dancer carry a personal one with them so that they know they have one. There should be no sharing of anything, especially water bottles, and water bottles should be cleaned after each session. So water bottle taken to dance on Monday is not the same, or needs to be cleaned before it comes back to dance on Tuesday. And there should be no eating during breaks. And if so, they want to be in a designated area so that they're not transmitting towards other dancers. Again, keeping that 2-meter distance. So screening. The screening that should, symptom screens are important. It's one of the ways that not only you as a parent and the dancer can stay aware of how they're feeling, but it gives the studios something concrete to go by as to what their students and faculty and staff are feeling. So it's suggested that you do it no more than 2 hours prior to arrival. As we know, we can wake up in the morning and feel fine, and by 4 o'clock we're starting to feel a little bit tired and sluggish. So doing 2 hours before is a good window to allow for the symptoms that are going to be present at class time to be there. Temperature screening is a useful tool, though it needs to be known that it is a late symptom. So typically, if there is already a fever, the person has already probably had symptoms or been a carrier, and the temperature is kind of a way to just make sure you're not further exposing them to other people. Temperature does need to be acclimatized, especially here in Edmonton. You know, this past week has been hot. We've been hot or low 30s, so people coming in from outside are going to be showing possibly higher than normal. And once we hit November, December, they're going to be colder. Their skin's being colder than normal, so they're going to read low. So you actually might get some false negatives. Another thing to be aware of is that around that 4 o'clock hour is when everybody will have their highest temperature of the day, just based on physiology. So if one thing you can recommend to your studio, or you as a parent can do before they go back to school and back to the studio, is the week before, consistently take their temperature at around that time, or pick a designated time to take a temperature, and that way you have their baseline temperature, and then that way if they are reading high, you can say, no, that is their normal temperature at this time. Screenings can be done paper or online. That is up to the studio, just making sure they are following privacy laws in regards to storing the information. But online does help if you have a large studio you go to, so they don't have so many pieces of paper to deal with. Dancers are encouraged to wear masks while entering and exiting the studio, and anytime they're in common areas, so walking to the washroom, switching classes. If they are allowed to wait for their next class in a lounge, they should be wearing one as well. And make sure you know the reason why they have all this is so that if you do come in contact with someone who does test positive for COVID, or it does happen at the studio, make sure you have the protocol that the studio is going to follow and that you know who you've been in contact with. So participating in dancer hygiene. We want to encourage washing hands regularly. We've heard it since February and March. So 20 seconds, find a song they can sing, Happy Birthday Twice, the ABCs. Lots of people have been singing choruses to their favorite songs. So just find something that's comfortable for your dancer to sing, that they can remember easily and that they won't rush through. Again, hand sanitizer stations, alcohol sanitizer should be greater than 60%. And we want to avoid touching the face. So if the dancers are doing self-choreo, discourage them from putting any of the slow drags across the face. And then talk to the choreographers as well about if they're incorporating stuff like that into the dances. So the dreadful what if. So what if someone does test positive or shows up to the studio with symptoms? So showing up to the studio with symptoms is where the rapid response plan would need to come in play. So again, you get to ask the question is there a plan? And what is it? Basis of the plan should be that that person is sent home immediately. Everything should be clean that they have come in contact with. They need to be isolated from other participants as much as you can and as soon as possible from finding out they're symptomatic. And then what you need to find out is, will the studio be canceling any sessions from that day? Is it just the session that that person was in? Or will they be canceling all classes at the studio, given the spaces and the chance of them coming across somebody else? So that's the rapid response plan. Then you also need to find out what the positive test protocol is. So if dancer A ends up testing positive, what is their plan for dancers B through E? Will they all be asked to not come in? Are they asked to then get tests themselves? So again, asking the questions of the what ifs. Along with going back to school or going back to dance, many of us are going back to school and having to make that decision of staying home or being in person. So if you are going into school, be aware that the symptom check that you are going to do in the morning may not be exactly the same as how your child feels when it's time to go to dance. So you cannot use your morning sign and symptom check and your morning temperature as a basis of whether or not your dancer is ready to go to class that evening. It's also important to remember that whatever happens at a school affects dance, and what happens at dance affects school. So if you are cohorting at school and you are also cohorting at dance, you need to understand that you're in close contact with more people and therefore a larger chance of transmission. Knowing both rapid response and positive test protocols for school and dance are important. There is having seen different signs and symptom checks lately, one or two words can change the meaning as to whether or not someone can come to class, both at school and at dance. So if you have happened to come in contact with someone who has been in contact with someone who's positive, some protocols will allow you to still attend school and dance, and some protocols will not, based on the wording of their protocol. So check thoroughly with both plans to make sure that you know if something happens at either or, how it affects the other in your life, because we all know that scheduling and knowing what's going on is hard enough as it is. So there is also the ability to have hybrid classes, and checking with your studio as to what their hybrid classes are. Some studios are offering hybrid classes where some people are online and some people are in person at the same time. And some people are offering hybrid classes where you alternate back and forth online and in person. Know that you need to do what's best for your family. So some studios are offering the ability for you to be solely online, and some are offering you the ability to be solely in person, but you get to make the choice for your family. You may have elderly person staying with you, or you may be working in an industry where you have more contact with people, and you want to do what's best for your family. If you are alternating in person and online, We are recommending that you alternate every 2 weeks based on the 14-day kind of incubation and recovery period. Doing a 2-week and 2-week is ideal. So 2 weeks online, 2 weeks in person, and continuing that through the year if that is the type of hybrid class that your studio is offering. So creating cohort groups. One of the questions you get to ask your studio is, are we doing cohorting or are we doing distancing classes? And we're going to talk about cohorting first. So cohorting means that there is no social distancing. The dancers are allowed to be near each other. The typical choreo that we would have seen in the past will be done. If you are doing choreography, it is more than likely your studio is creating cohorts. So in a sport cohort or dance cohort, we're allowed to have 50 people maximum. That will include teachers, choreographers, dancers, and any staff that comes in contact. Now, saying that, because we are very well aware that teachers and choreographers move from group to group within a studio and move from studio to studio quite often. So if the teachers and choreographers are being with other groups and are being in other studios, they are not allowed to be in contact. So they have to stay that 2-meter distance away from any of the dancers, where the dancers are allowed to be within 2 meters of each other. So we recommend that there's no more than 40 to 50 dancers in a cohort, just based on the fact that you do have to include teachers, staff, and other choreographers. So the same cohort has to be used for every session and routine. And if you were going to switch cohorts, there has to be 14-day isolation between the two. Give me a thumbs up in the chat if that makes sense. While you're doing that, I will. All right, so kind of breaking down cohorts a little bit. So let's say we have, and we're going to use ballet because a lot of studios do use ballet as their way of breaking them up. So let's say we have 2 grade 2 ballet classes. All right, so we have group A and group B. Within those groups, they can create numerous other classes and groups within those. Okay, as long as they're staying under that group of 50. So let's say group A is 20 kids and group B is 20 kids. They can be on their own in their own groups and cohorts. Because we were under that 50 dancer total, because we each had 20 in each group, group A and group B can be brought together to create group AB. Right? And within those, you can mix any dancers from group A and B, as long as, again, they're just staying in those groups. So they could have classes separately as group A and separately as group B, and together as group AB. What we can't do then is, let's say we end up having a small group of, let's say, grade 3 ballet dancers, and then they want to take 2 group dancers out of that group and create a group D. That's because of the amount of kids in group C. If they're over 10, so let's say there's 15 in group C, we can't mix those groups because then we have a cohort that's over 50. Did that make sense? Yay! As I said, I've done a couple presentation for teachers, and I told them I don't envy their job, because figuring this out just on my own and not having to put dancers and abilities and all that and schedules together, it was interesting. Yes, remember the magic number of 50, and that's if you're cohorting. Okay, So the magic number is 50 if we're cohorting. So let's say we're doing group distancing classes. We get to mix groups up, sort of. So again, if we go back to A and B, okay, if we're doing distancing classes, you can still have kids from A and kids in B in a class together if we're distancing, because they're not cohorting. But we do want to minimize the number of times we start bringing in C, D, E, and F. So you still want to minimize your amount of numbers. Do you want to do it as similar as you can to cohorting? So the best way to do it is a cohort group with distancing. So we've all seen different pictures of studios and how they're breaking up their classrooms and their studios. So based on the 2-meter guideline, lots of studios are doing 2-meter by 2-meter boxes that are adjoining. So there's dancer A and there's dancer B. And that works because they're actually in a similar spot in their box and they're maintaining their 2-meter distance. Dancer C and D, again, are in similar places in their box and therefore maintaining their 2-meter distance. We have E and F, but because dancer E is on the border of the boxes, we're not maintaining that 2-meter social distancing. So in a cohort group, this works. If we're social distancing, we have to be one of these two. Now, if we have dancers in all our boxes, again, this does not work in a social distancing class, but would work in a cohorting class. So we're sticking with that 2-meter square box, but we're putting dancers in all of our squares. Okay, they are good that way because they're moving in the same space. Because we have one dancer who's not maintaining the same spacing, we've now lost our distancing ability. So good for social distancing class, good for a cohort class, but not a social distancing class. Now, I know as a parent, you can't go in and be like, we need to change our grid system. What this is to help you understand is how the grid systems can work and have a discussion with your dancer. So if you're doing a 2-meter square box, I kind of like the alternating boxes because it does allow for a little bit more movement from side to side and up and down, and making sure that the dancers are staying spaced. But if then even though we're in our 2-meter boxes and we're diagonally spaced, if one dancer or two dancers don't go with the flow, they're not the same. And we all know dancers move at different speeds, have different steps, widths, and lengths. So they're not necessarily going to all be moving in the same pattern as the ones next to them. So a more ideal setting is to have your 2-meter square box with a meter in between. Because with that situation, even though one dancer is close to the edge, we are maintaining 2-meter differences. Because of only the meter, so they can't be close to each other on the edge. A little more freedom, but again, 2 dancers can ruin it for everybody. So what the ideal grid system is a 2 or 3 meter square box, if the studio allows for it, and having 2 or 3 meters in between. Understanding that that's going to make class sizes smaller and harder to schedule, but if we're social distancing, as we can see, everything works out. Many dancers dance at more than one studio. What needs to happen this year is you need to be checking with both studios that you dance with. Some studios are not going to allow for dancing at more than one studio due to cohorting and just the increased chance of your ability to be exposed. So check your studios at the policy or the policies at each studio. If you are able to go from one to another, we suggest that you switch your mask between. Same as we suggest you would switch the mask from coming to school to the studio. If one of the studios is cohorting, then you can only stay at that studio. You can't be going into the other studio, even if they're doing social distancing, because you are only allowed one cohort at a time. So you would have to follow the 14-day isolation before switching. So in saying that, you could do, let's say you're Studio A, you're going to be done in October and you're cohorting at Studio A. You can see if Studio B would allow you to be online until you were done at Studio A and have had a 14-day period after your last session with them before going into Studio at Studio B. Equipment and props. Encouraging dancers, and we've encouraged studios to tell their dancers that they need to start bringing their own strength and stretching equipment. So yoga blocks, stretching ropes, banding, mats, balls. And then when you bring them home, you should be cleaning them. If the studio is using props, they should be assigned to a dancer and the dancer takes them home with them and brings them back to each class. And again, they should be cleaning after each use. There shouldn't be any large studio props this year because of the ability to clean them and who's all touching them. So equipment that is being used has to be able to be disinfected. Don't be buying stuff that does not handle cleaning well. Any cleaning equipment, any equipment that is shared needs to be cleaned regularly. If possible during training, we've had some sporting groups come, we have a volleyball team that is cleaning their balls every 30 minutes during a practice, just to try and help maintain a sense of clean equipment during a practice and training time. They must be cleaned in between training sessions and especially in between classes. One of the two biggest things in dance that we gotta look at are the bars and the mats. Bars need to be cleaned after use and after class, and dancers should be cleaning their hands before and after use. So either using their own personal hand sanitizer or there should be one in the studio room. Mats should be one dancer per mat based on size. It should be a little island, and they need to be disinfected after class. It is important to note that after disinfecting, they need to be dried. It's not okay to disinfect them and then fold them back up. Everything needs to dry before being put away. Performances are not recommended at the moment for children. When we do get into performance time, we do need to allow for a ramp-up time. Okay, so you want to talk to your studio about what their plan is come spring when competition and performance season starts, whether or not their plan for gearing up to it. As much as they're doing the best they can for teaching and choreography wise, it is very different from dancing in a 2-meter square box to suddenly having to go across the floor and get there in a certain time. Be aware of spectator requirements. You may not be allowed to be your dancer this year or be allowed to help them backstage. If there are dressing rooms, what a recommendation we would make to any competition or venue is that there is only one studio per dressing room or 2 dressing rooms, and trying to keep cohorts together and not having mix. Whatever happens in the spring and right now, we must follow the guidelines put out by the provincial and municipal governments. And I do stress this a little bit. If one municipality is allowing for performances and every other municipality in the province is not, or in your area is not, do we really think it's advisable that we should be then performing? So again, doing what's best for you and your family. When we start looking at actual training and class time, one of the biggest things we stress in sports medicine is that injuries often occur from doing too much too soon after doing too little too long. Many studios have had a variety of what they did at the end of last season and throughout the summer. Dancers have, as always, have a differing level of activity during the summertime. So everyone is going to be in a different place, and even more so coming into this season than last season. Some dancers will have done a few things, some dancers will have danced regularly, and you're going to have some that really haven't done anything since February or March, and maybe have done a few, like the odd class in that time. So at the beginning, we should be encouraging distancing in classes with a focus on technique and skill acquisition. We need to ease in a little bit. Lots of studios are running intensives or conditioning camps. They need to be aware that 1 week of conditioning camp and 1 week of intensive is not enough to go into middle of the season type activities and skills in class. So this is where you get to talk to your dance teachers, your studio director, as well as your dancer, and find out what's been going on. So letting your dancer know that things are going to be different. Okay, their teacher might not be allowed to provide the hands-on support and teaching that they've been able to. So check provincial guidelines and municipal as to what is allowed for touching. The teachers should be wearing a mask if they are going to be within close contact of any of the dancers. Prepare them for online classes, hybrid or that hybrid style where they're 1 week in, 1 week out, or some may be online and some may be in person. They might be in class with their friends, but they might not be in the same space as their friends. We, of course, are encouraging 0 to minimal partner work with any of our dance teachers. If you have a child that likes to hug their dance teacher, unfortunately, that's still not allowed. So you're going to have to come up with a different way to express appreciation. Get used to checking your emails or other available apps that are available to sporting groups and dance groups to share information. So intensity level, starting off a little bit slow. You're going to have kids, like I said, kids who have not done anything, kids who have gone backwards from where they were at the end of last season or when they shut down. And you may have some kids that have progressed from where they were last season. So you want to kind of start off a little bit slower instead of just hitting the throttle and going full out. As many of us know who had any sport or activity occurring at home, it is not the same as being in the studio. Houses are not, they don't have the flooring as a studio and they don't have the space as a studio. So though they've been training at home and working, it's not exactly the same. And that's where we get some dancers who may have fallen backwards. So we have recommended to teachers to do assessments, right? Your athletes will have grown and they need to relearn how to move and carry their body. Dance is a very technique-based activity, and therefore the slightest little change in the body can affect things like jumps and turns. So doing it to focus on technique, it's always good to go back to basics. So you may have your dancer coming home and complaining that they're bored in class and that they're working on things that they knew when they were 5. And they may rightfully be doing that, but what you have to ask your dancer is, why is that happening? Is your dance teacher having you focus on the basics because they have the time to, or because we all need to? We all need to take a look at what exactly we can and cannot do. It's always good to be able to go back and work on pirouette prep, even if you're able to do a triple. Your prep can always get better. One thing you want to limit is repetitive motion. So if a dancer is struggling or with an older skill or learning a newer skill that's being taught, Limiting repetitive motions early on. So they're going to be doing repetitions in the studio and working on things to improve that skill. When they come home, as much as they need to be working on stuff at home, they need to find a different way or breaking up how much they're doing at home. The 10,000 hour and 10,000 rep thing that was popularized a few years ago in some ways works, but we have to make sure that we're not doing 10,000 reps in a week. It's over a longer period of time. So you might be seeing a bigger focus on conditioning and strength and skill, technique and training. Based on the fact that we don't know what's going on in competition-wise in the dance world, we should not see a focus on choreography early. But in saying that, it's okay that if your dancer is working on sometimes combos in class, because learning combos does help teach the skill of picking up choreography quickly. So you might be going back to fundamentals of jumps and turns, learning how to tendu, glisse, and battements, and it's okay to go back to basics. So injury prevention. So this is where that progressive intensity in class comes into play. And this is where you as a dance parent get to talk to your dancer about not going full out right at first. They're going to be excited because they're back in studio. They're seeing their dance friends. They're back with their favorite teachers, getting to do what they love. And they're going to go full out, and they're going to want to show their dance teacher that they haven't lost it, okay? That they haven't moved backwards, that they still have it, and look what I've learned in the time that we've been off. So talk to them about how focusing on technique and skill is important and doing what they have been taught to do. And then we talked about not falling into that repetition hole. And then avoiding activities that are high risk. So if you have a dancer who does acro, let's say they've been at home, they haven't really been able to do much tumbling yet, let's not start doing aerials the first day back. Okay, let's rebuild that strength, rebuild that technique that is needed to get to that point. So what happens if an injury occurs at the studio? What qualification does the faculty and the staff at the studio occur? Do they have first aid? Do they have CPR? What level of first aid do they have, as there is a variety of levels? And who is in charge of managing injuries? When you read over provincial guidelines, they recommend that family members are the ones providing care in case someone, dancer gets hurt. Sorry, hang on. But many studios are not allowing parents into the studio to decrease numbers. So who is going to be in charge of managing those injuries? Is it the teacher? Is there one specific staff member that's going to be there every day? Again, many questions you get to ask. Always good to know what your studio's emergency action plan is. So if there was a serious injury to occur, what will occur and what's the plan? If you are going to miss a class, be very clear as to why. You can be very honest, be honest about if it's an injury, be honest about whether it's a cold. Missing a class is going to be very high on the radar of every studio this year, and you want to make sure that you're being clear as to why you're missing it, so they are not making an assumption that you are now under COVID protocols. Okay, so be clear as to why, and also find out that, okay, if I am injured, do you still want me in class or can I be online, right? Just to reduce the number of times that you're in person. General rule of thumb for injury management as a dance parent, we're going to follow the Price principle. So we've talked about prevention. You want to rest the injury, and rest is relative. It does not mean your dancer gets to lie on the couch and spend their time on Instagram and watching TikTok. It is relative. So they were trying to rest the area that was injured within pain-free ranges. So it doesn't, if they've hurt their ankle, it doesn't mean don't walk. It means, this probably means don't jump right now. What you want to do is ice for the first 24 to 40 hours to help reduce any excess swelling and inflammation. C is for compression. So when we're talking about compression, we just want to add a little bit of compression to the area to help with that swelling, and then elevation to help encourage fluid flow back into the core of the body. So injury awareness. After a long period of downtime, we have an increased injury risk. 2 of the times where injury risk increases are beginning of the season and end of the season. Remind your dancer that they are probably going to be sore. They are going to be doing things that they haven't been doing on a regular basis for a while, so their muscles are going to be sore, and they might be learning how to use their muscle differently. So there might be soreness involved, but prolonged pain is not good. So I would say if after a few days the pain has not gone away, you should seek treatment, and just to make sure that everything is okay. Apprehension in the body equals tension. So as much as we hope that we have tried to take stress away from our children at this time, they have apprehension and anxieties about what's going on as well. They are excited to get back, which again brings tension into the body, and a tense body has a larger tendency to be injured. So let your dancer be able to express themselves and release that tension and anxiety, and then they should hopefully have an injury-free start to dance. And this is another reason why we're encouraging a large focus on conditioning and technique at the beginning, because too much too soon or too fast typically leads to injury. So how do you prep your dancer? You're going to talk about mask and hand hygiene. Okay. Maybe have mask bags, so your dancer can carry around a bag that has clean mask and dirty mask. They have their hand sanitizer, again washing for 20 seconds. Making sure we get our palms in between our fingers, our thumbs, our nails, and the backs of our hands. They want to be prepared for back-to-back classes. So let's say they have a jazz class going into a ballet class. They may have to wear their ballet stuff to jazz, as the only thing they should be doing is changing their shoes. They should not be changing in public areas or in the studio. Find out what stretch and strengthening supplies are required by your studio based on the level of your dancer. Have them prepared in a bag for your dancer to take with them. Talk about moving in their box, right? So that's one of the reasons we showed the grids. So you can show a dancer what it is like if they are not moving at the same pace or place as the others in their class. Your dancer's comfort is what is most important. If they are feeling overwhelmed and unable to, and do not feel comfortable or safe in the studio setting, you as the parent get to say, you're right, and you can talk to the studio and find what's right for you and your dancer to do, because their comfort is important. And it may be, you may be a family where you were in the studio and not in school, or you were in school and not in the studio. And again, whatever your decision you make is yours, and it's best for your family and for your dancer. How to transition from school to studio. We know from past years, and this year will be no different, you'll be going from school straight to studio at many times. So they are going to have to master the art of getting changed in the car. They will have to understand that they will have to clean when they get in the car from class, get changed, clean their hands before they go get ready to go into the studio, switching their masks, probably eating in the car since you won't be eating at the studio, understanding how to have those quick snacks that they can eat going into. One other thing you're going to have to prepare for is where are they going to do their schoolwork. Many dancers have gotten used to having breaks at the studio and doing their homework there. Lots of studios are not having open areas. So you are going to have to work on studying in the car, finding time when it works to do so. Oh, excuse me. So as a parent, we have to have a level of understanding. Understanding for ourselves, understanding for our dancer, understanding for our fellow dance parents and our children's dance friends and partners, as everyone's going to have a different degree of comfort. Some may be in the studio and not 100% be comfortable about it. Some may have missed it so much they don't care and they're there. and again, they may not 100% understand and accept your wanting to be separate and distant. So talk to your dancer, talk about what you're comfortable with and what your expectations of what will go on to them. We are all stressed, even the kids are stressed. The next 2 weeks, 3 weeks are going to be very big in our worlds. The kids are going to be expressing themselves differently, and we're going to talk a little bit about mental health and what to look for, but just know that they are stressed, and as much as we think going back to the studio is what's best for them, it might actually be causing them more stress than what's needed, and you have to allow them to express that to you. Have patience with your studio. They have never done this before, as you have never done this before. So understand that they are learning the new rules and procedures, and they may not understand them exactly how you do. If you have questions, and I'm sure you have many after today, I know part of what I've given you is not knowledge, but what you can take back to your studio to get more knowledge. Asking the right questions will hopefully give you the right answers. So give them the patience to learn with you. And if they don't have the answer for you when you ask it right away, allow them to have time to find out the answer. If they blow you off, is different than whether or not they say, let me get back to you. But make sure you give them kind of a timeline as to when you need to know by. I talked about being clear with your dancer in regard to expectation. You know, that you will wear your mask when you're checking in, you will wear your mask when you're going to the bathroom. Even while waiting for class, I want you to stand 2 meters away from those in your class. Give them the expectations of what you want so there is no surprises later on. So you as a parent, we have to help guide our child. So being back into dance and school, having the structure of both will be helpful. But we also have to realize that at the end of last year for school and dance, there was a heavy sense of loss. And they may not have expressed it then, they might actually express it now, or we may think they have dealt with it, but they are now expressing it now, the sense of loss now. But there also is going to be that anticipation and anxiousness. Right? Most of us left the studio in March. We left school in March. And so now they're getting back. So they're excited and anticipating to get to see their friends, get to learn new things, be back with their favorite dance teachers. But there also is going to be anxiousness about knowing what to do. How is everyone going to be? There's going to be that feeling of, am I going to be uncool if I tell them I want to be distant? So you need to guide them through those feelings and be there for them. It goes back to that understanding. As much as we are coming back to the studio and coming back to school, I highly dislike the term normalcy. Nothing that we are going through right now is normal. The last time we went through this was 100 years ago, and we can't compare the times because we didn't have the same things socially as we do now. We wouldn't have been going to dance classes or hockey or even having the ability to think about online schooling. So this is not normal. What we are trying to get for your dancers by going to school and by coming back to the studio is a sense of familiarity. Being with those that they know, doing something that they love in a place that they're used to, having teachers that they're with. And they also have to prepare them for the fact that their teachers may have changed. You're going to have dance teachers who are unable to be at class at a certain time based on their own children or their other job. They may had to kind of put themselves with only 1 or 2 studios, and so that one class at your studio might not have fit into their schedule. So it's about familiarity, not normalcy. We all have a fear of the unknown. Every time we walk out our door, we're not sure what's going to happen. So we want to reaffirm our dancers and make sure that they know that what they are going through is okay, and they are allowed to express themselves, and they are allowed to be fearful and excited and joyful and everything wrapped in one, and you may experience all those emotions within a 10-minute car ride. One thing you can help your dancers do is to set goals, especially if they have found themselves kind of falling behind a little bit. So right now they might not be okay, but after a week or two into the studio, they might come home and they might say, Mom, Dad, you know, I can't do what I was able to do last year, or I feel like I'm not as good as I used to be. So setting realistic goals, using the SMART system to help them get back on track and give them something to work through. Having that structure of a goal system will help them in their classes as well as working at home. If your dancer is training at home, try and set out something with the studio and the teachers to make sure they are getting in touch with the dancer so they are still feeling that social contact. So the mental stuff. Children are resilient, but even they have their own breaking point. Again, we might not be in the same place as they are last year. Since March, there has been so much to deal with. Coming into September, they may be back in school, they may be back to online learning, which is now going to be different. They're having to figure out how to deal with new protocols, maybe not being in class with their best friend, maybe not being able to see their best friend because their best friend is online and they're in person. So they have a lot of stuff going on top of their normal going ons. So we can set a plan and goals. So the SMART protocol is that they need to be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and have a time frame. Make sure you're not over educating your children. I, even as a parent, struggle, what do they need to know and what do they not need to know about what's going on? So don't over inform them, but do kind of keep them in the loop. And it is okay to change your mind. You may start in class and in 2 weeks decide that it's not what you thought it was going to be, that it's not working for you, and you can change your mind. You get to be fluid. This whole situation is fluid. Returning to the studio is fluid, and nothing is set in stone. One thing we try and remind our dancers is that they only want to be better than themselves. So if they start coming home, and this is at any point in time in any season, and they're comparing themselves to dancer A, remind them to only compare them to themselves. So it is fine if dancer A can do a triple pirouette, but is your double more solid than their triple? Or, you know, you only could do a single a month ago and now you're doing doubles. Make sure they're trying to better themselves, not be better than someone else. So with the mental approach and side of the spectrum of your dancer and returning, they've come up with what they call the Canada approach. So that is check in, acceptance, navigate, adapt, discuss, and act. And we'll go through each one. So the check-in is how are they feeling? They can be green, yellow, or red, so comfort, challenge, or stop zone. And it's a way for them to look at themselves and find out where they are that day. I encourage you to almost incorporate it into your daily symptom screen. You can do it at the beginning of the day and then kind of your transition after school into dance or other activities, and find out how are they feeling. See where they're at. I don't know too many of us that are in the comfort zone right now. Most of us are probably in the challenge or stop zone. And then what we need to do is find ways to move down a zone. So what are things looking like, sounding like, and feeling like to us? Is the sound of their siblings' voice irritating? How do we move out of that stop zone or challenge zone and try and get closer to the comfort zone? There kind of needs to be a space right here, right? I don't think we're, like I said, we're not fully here, but we want to kind of be transitioning from challenge to comfort. So next is acceptance. One big thing that we need to understand is what can we control, right? Your dancer cannot control what the other dancers in their studio are doing, what their sister or brother are doing. They only can control what's in their purview, which is where the goals come in handy. If they are having a hard time, if they're in that stop and challenge zone, ways to navigate through that is through grounding. So a quick grounding exercise you can do is have your dancer tell themselves or out loud 5 things they can see, 4 things they can touch, 3 they can hear, 2 they can smell, and 1 they can taste. If they can't do the taste one, that's fine. But what it is just getting them used to grounding in their surroundings. So in the middle of the class, if things start to go a little stray and they're struggling, they can ground themselves. And it can be a quick, simple thing that brings them back into focus and back into class. So adapting. How can they change that? So that by using the grounding, they can adapt within a class to get back on track. Okay, what changes in their day or their training needs to occur to get them back. So maybe your dancer is finding it hard, is finding it hard to be in studio, and you can talk to them and then talk to the studio and their teachers about maybe you guys need to move your training to in-home for a while, or they are struggling at home, and how can you assist them in being able to train at home. So maybe we need to move where they're training. Maybe we need to get them a piece of flooring that's going to help them. What can we change and adapt to help them? Who do they have to talk to? Are they able to talk to their dance teacher, a family member, or a friend? Who are they able to talk to? They can talk to a school teacher. I always like it when I'm working with patients and clients and they tell me that they have a friend that they talk to that's outside of their sport. I always feel that you kind of need someone that's in the grind with you and then someone that's outside of the grind because they have a different kind of view as to what's going on. So who do they have that they can discuss with? It could be you, it could be an aunt or grandma, someone that they can just be like, hey, today really sucked at dance and I just need to talk about it. And acting. So how do we adapt? We can set out our goals and our actions to try and get out of the zones. And like I said, this doesn't using this Canada approach can be more than just if they're in that challenge or stop zone. You can use it as a regular basis if they're finding a struggle. So if they're having a hard time even accomplishing a skill, or in school they are just not getting their multiplication tables, you can use this Canada approach into finding a way to work through that. So what we need to be concerned about is if their dancers are having more than a bad day, right? So if any of these mental health symptoms show up for more than 7 to 14 days, so we have that change in behavior, communication, so you have your dancer who normally at least would kind of talk to you at supper, or at least on the ride home would talk to you, now is completely shut down. If it goes on for more than a few days, that's something we need to be concerned about. They're getting more irritable or cranky, they're withdrawing even from their social circle, and any out of character behavior. So here are the Canada mental health supports that are available. And if you want, I can send you all the links in the presentation. So there's Kids Help Home, which is awesome because they now have a text service, which is really good for kids. There's youth space, crisis services, and then there's also online apps that your dancer can use. So behind every young child who believes themselves as a parent who believes first, we are the base for our children. If we believe in them and if we are there to support them, then they will succeed. So our job right now as parents might not be trying to help them achieve their goal of, you know, reaching a certain position, or if we go to the competitions, like placing a certain way or uh, accomplishing something. Right now, being successful is getting them safely back into the studio and doing what they love. So you get to ask, as I said, as many questions as you can of your studio and your teachers. And I find it important to ask how each teacher is doing stuff. So even though the studio might have set out, this is how we want things, you can ask how each individual teacher is going to do that, how they are going to make that happen in their daily classes. I have found that acro has really adjusted well, because it's pretty easy to put a kid in on their mat and that's their island. Ballet is doing well. They just do a lot of center work. It would be interesting to how they transition with bar. I find tap, but more like the jazz and lyrical, anything where we're doing a lot across the floor, those teachers are having to kind of adjust a little more than they are used to. So every teacher has their teaching style, and you know your dancers teachers, so you'll kind of know what questions to ask the teacher specifically. So this is kind of a list of the references that we used in creating this presentation and working on any return to plays that we have been involved in. And then I wanted to thank you guys for joining us tonight. So I will be doing a draw for a foot and shoe deodorizer and disinfectant, as well as a elite cleansing cream. So if you want to put your email in the chat, I will do a draw and then contact you on how to get to you on whoever the winner is. And also, we are your lifeline. There was a lot of information tonight. If you're not quite sure what exact question to ask, or if you get an answer and you're not 100% sure if you get, if the answer kind of fell into the line of what you wanted, feel free to give us a call or send us send us an email. And we're happy to guide you and be able to provide you with the resources you need if needed when talking to your studio. So, do you guys have any questions? I'm glad that it has done that.